was gonna say, like, on top of that, it's the community you're buying into too, and like that's one of the coolest things. What I've observed over this weekend is or this week, not weekend. It feels like it's been a party, so it feels like it's been a weekend. But it's a Thursday today, I believe, and
It's Thursday all
yeah,
day.
it is Thursday. Cool. But like that's the coolest thing, that a lot of people have been pressing is community, and and what you were saying about like Facebook, there was a demand for this, and now with this NFT space, with the Web3 emergence, I guess you could say, like none of these platforms have been built for this capability. When Twitter, Facebook, all this was, no one would have thought of Web3 or Layer 3 or any of that kind of stuff. So like now there's an interesting opportunity for this space to have a new platform that has the tools that you need to interact and learn about this space, because right now it's so scattered, and the community and the utilities that these communities, I wouldn't say demand, but it's the people who are making these projects. They're like, okay, this would be really cool. Our community's seeing a lapse here, or how do we add to this? How do we make this piece of the puzzle that's missing? How do we put it there? And that's, NFTs is just, the custody of data through a smart contract. It's just you interacting with a smart contract, and what you can do with that is virtually endless.
But
And
it's almost better than that in that you own it, but you're only a web address, or not a web address, a wallet address. Where if you own, something, an amazing, Bored Ape or something like that, I can look up and find out that, what wallet address owns it, but I don't know whose that is to. There's a privacy layer to NFTs as well that I appreciate. And that's where we get into, decentralized. And like you said, Web 3.0. NFTs will make this to where finally you can, like somebody owns the Mona Lisa, somebody owns, great pieces of art. I don't know who they are, but I could look it up. But it can be very more difficult to do that with NFTs because there is a security layer to it. And security is going to become more and more important. Everybody values their privacy more than ever before. And NFTs will take us into that realm to where we'll realize that this Web 3.0, this decentralized web, is going to be able to take us further than anything we've ever seen before. And it's going to be because of that custody that you talked about that we can do even anonymously. I can have, these free NFTs that you got in New York for, swag, I guess, that you got. You can give those out to somebody and you can make it completely anonymous for who you sent it to. That's a different world. Right now, if somebody owns a very, a Michael Jordan rookie card, a LeBron James rookie card, if somebody, transfers that over, if it's a big enough dollar amount, it usually makes the news. People know about it. People know what the names are of the people that were in the parties that are doing the transacting. But in NFT world, or just the crypto world or the blockchain world, it is not the case. There is still this layer of privacy that I think is great for the world, really. I was just going to say the industry, but the world on top of that. Whenever we talk about ownership, whenever I'm thinking about who, what industry needs to prove ownership, well, I always go back to concert and sporting events. You need to be able to prove that I own that ticket and I didn't just print it out on my amazing printer. Okay, maybe I went out on Amazon and said, "What printer do I need to get to fraud? Have some fraudulent tickets?" And you can't do that on the blockchain. You could immediately be able to see whether the wallet address that this person possesses actually owns that ticket. And so many things can come from there with NFTs after that. You could get freebies for going to your concert. You could get digital sports cards for going to a sporting event. There's so many things that we could get into that you could do that need an entrance in to be able to. But let me take it a step further on when NFTs can take us. Could we have, and I know this because I've done an AMA with a group that's trying to pull this off, could we have facial recognition to be able to be tied to your wallet address and therefore tied to a photo identification or an identification ID. In other words, when you go into the bar and you've got your fake ID in your back pocket, okay, because you're not old enough to drink yet, uh, but the fake ID's always worked for you. Your McLovin ID, it always works for you. But imagine a world where there's a camera right there at the door, and it's actually seeing your face, scans your face, and then it can go to an ID that's associated with your face that's held on the blockchain that can tell how old you are. It can probably tell other things. Now, that world may be scary because now we're getting into security and privacy talk, which we will cover on another episode. But that can tell you what we can do with NFTs. NFTs can take us a lot of places. They can be rather private, but I think a lot of the, call it the man, the institutions out there may adopt NFTs. The United States Postal Service just signed on with a group called Vivi that they're going to be releasing some NFTs through them. So don't think that it's only always going to be you and your cool friends that are into NFTs. This is going to grow. This is going to be huge. And the good news for you is, if you don't like that, is you're in early and there are financial incentives into being in early. So for that, I'm excited.
I think one of the things that you could take it a step further is that, yeah, you don't have to identify yourself, who you are, what your name is, what your address is, but you can still interact in these organizations, this whole space, and still have your say. Like, you still have your vote, you still have your ownership of not only the JPEG or whatever it represents, this NFT, but you can still be that anonymous source and still be an active participant in the network, and your vote is no different than anyone else's, no matter if you have $7 in your bank account and they have $5.7 billion in their wallet. You have the same vote, and it's fair and democratic in that way. And you don't have to tie it to your reputation, who you are. It's all it is your interaction with that smart contract, and that's such a better way of doing things, in my opinion.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you like it like that. And I think that's where we're more moving to. But decentralization is a process. For instance, a lot of these companies that are just starting out and want to get wide acceptance into the NFT space still have centralization as their onboarding procedure. This VV group I was talking about that did this, collaboration with the USPS, they, you sign on basically through the Apple App Store, very centralized. But eventually, I had talked to somebody about it on here yesterday, and they said they want to get it to where you can move it to your own wallet and keep it to where it's very, private. But I do think decentralization is a process. It's not something that just, you know, from day one is the case. You have to kind of move towards that to where you eventually get to where you're completely decentralized. I mean, even Bitcoin was all held by one person at one time, and it kind of moved towards that decentralization that we see today, and that'll keep on being the case.
And centralization isn't, it always gets kind of villainized as a bad word. Like, there are plenty of applications where centralized stuff is necessary. Like, and not to talk about, Traderverse specifically, but like, all this information should be centralized to one location, but the interactions of how the network and how people interact should be decentralized in the way where it's not controlled. But to have it all in one place just as an efficiency thing, it makes sense. So there's always going to be some level of centralization or closed network, in any sort of organization. Too much decentralization can be chaos in a way where it's just not inefficient for the network. It's not efficient for the consumer. But it is when it comes to your identity and when it comes to the voting actions, the how the interactions work. That's when decentralization becomes so key, because then it's a distribution of power within the ledger and not necessarily the information within.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. What decentralization to me means, as far as what it offers to us, is it offers somebody maybe in a different country that normally wouldn't have had the opportunity to buy certain things. Even if they had the funds to be able to do it, they wouldn't be able to buy certain things. And, decentralization makes it to where, transfer of ownership of something is borderless. is, not time sensitive where you have to wait a week for your bank to clear some kind of money or anything like that. It completely takes out a lot of the pitfalls of centralization. But just like you said, centralization has a place. And usually, in my mind, it is exactly for what you just said in efficiency. A lot of businesses are going to be centralized, and that's completely fine. I do think over time they will move some of their parts of their business to a decentralized format. For instance, if you've seen a Fox token that has to do with I can't think of the swap name right now, but they are going to a completely decentralized, they're moving to a DAO. They're not even going to have really a CEO. They're going to let the community decide how that particular organization makes decisions. And that's a different way of thinking. So, to answer also the question of where can NFTs take us, it's probably into a paradigm shift of how we think about things and how we think decisions get made and things like that. Because that always will, it's governed us so far as well. The decision is made by somebody else. Okay. But now with the advent of the DAO and, NFTs being able to give you something more than just appreciation for art, they may actually give you access into something or voting rights into something. That is a part that I think is always good. And those things can be implemented even in a centralized structure. It doesn't have to be, it's either decentralized or not decentralized. Centralization doesn't need to be vilified in the thinking that it cannot have aspects of decentralization in the midst of it.
Be sure to listen in to all of our weekly shows and follow us on Twitter for updates.